Cowboy entered the gun shop for bullets, came out carrying a widow's secret. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon, but its early light already touched the dusty streets of Redridge. The town was small, the kind where everyone knew everyone else, and where the sound of a horse's hooves echoed like a heartbeat in the morning silence. The air was dry and smelled faintly of hay and old leather, and a soft wind carried the distant crowing of roosters and the occasional bark of a dog. Tom Sawyer rode slowly into town, the familiar creak of his saddle the only other sound accompanying him. He was a cowboy of no small reputation, known not just for his skill with a horse or a gun, but for the quiet, thoughtful way he moved through the world. His face was sun-tanned, lines etched from years of long rides under the scorching sun, and his hands, strong and calloused, rested easily on the reins. His eyes, sharp and steady, scanned the street as if he could read the stories hidden in every building. He had come into Redridge for a simple reason. The week's hunting had left him short on bullets, and he needed to stock up before heading out again. There was no great urgency in his stride, no rush in his thoughts. He liked to take the mornings slowly, to feel the town wake up around him before the world demanded attention. Horses whinnied in the distance, and a faint smell of fresh bread drifted from the bakery at the corner. A few townspeople were beginning their day. A woman hanging laundry, a boy sweeping the sidewalk, an old man squinting at the sun from a rocking chair. Tom tipped his hat politely as he passed, but most barely glanced at him. In a town like this, cowboys came and went, and only those with trouble in their wake earned more than a passing glance. The gun shop was just past the general store, a small wooden building with a creaky sign that read Miller's Gun Shop in faded letters. Its windows were dusty, though carefully cleaned enough to hint at the glint of metal inside. Tom guided his horse to the hitching post outside, tied the reins with a practiced knot, and stepped down. His boots made a soft crunch against the gravel, and for a moment the quiet was absolute, broken only by the creaking of the door as he pushed it open. Inside, the shop smelled strongly of gun oil and wood polish, a scent Tom found oddly comforting. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with rifles, pistols, and boxes of ammunition. There were knives hung carefully in rows, and a few pieces of hunting gear tucked into corners. The morning light filtered through the front windows, catching the dust motes floating lazily in the air. Behind the counter stood Mr. Miller, an elderly man with a gray beard and a stooped posture, whose eyes crinkled with experience and memory every time he smiled. "Morning, Tom," Miller greeted, his voice warm but low, like someone who had spoken quietly all his life. "Here for the usual?" "Yes, sir. I need a few boxes of bullets. The deer won't wait, and I won't be short this time." Miller chuckled softly and began reaching for the shelves. "You're getting faster with age, but the bullets always take their time." He picked up a couple of boxes, tapping them lightly to check the weight. "Been hunting much these days?" Tom glanced around the shop, feeling the familiar comfort of the space. "A little," he said. "The woods have been kind, but I like to be prepared." He liked routine, liked the simplicity of knowing what he came for and leaving with it. But today, something in the air seemed slightly off, though he couldn't quite name it. Maybe it was the way the morning sunlight hit the shelves or the faint creak of a floorboard upstairs. Something made him pause, make a careful glance beyond the counter. He stepped closer to a shelf stocked with rifle bullets, fingering the boxes. That's when he noticed it, a small, folded piece of paper tucked behind one of the boxes. At first he thought it was just a scrap, a note someone had forgotten, but there was something about it that made him pull it out. The paper was old, slightly worn around the edges, and the handwriting was hurried but careful. Tom's curiosity was immediate. Normally he didn't pry. Other people's business was theirs, and in Redridge, a man minding his own life was safest. But something about this note, something in the way it had been hidden, made him unfold it slowly, carefully, as if it were fragile. The words on the page jumped out, written in a neat, trembling hand. It was a confession, a private truth that someone had not meant to leave behind. He read it once, then twice, and felt a knot tighten in his chest. The note spoke of a woman, Clara, a widow in town, and of secrets she had kept after her husband's death. It spoke of betrayal, of business dealings that had gone wrong, of fears she could no longer bear alone. Tom's instincts immediately sensed the weight of it. This wasn't idle gossip or a petty quarrel. This was a life tangled in danger and unspoken truths, and somehow he had stumbled into it. For a long moment he simply stood there, holding the note, the weight of it strange in his hands. Mr. Miller continued arranging his shelves, unaware of the tension, unaware that the cowboy in front of him had just become a keeper of someone else's hidden world. Tom's mind raced. Should he leave it be? Should he ignore what he had found and go about his simple task? Or should he somehow act, knowing the note might contain the very danger that could reach Clara? He shook his head slowly, trying to clear the swirl of thoughts. He had come for bullets, and bullets were all he had planned to carry. Yet now, as the sun climbed higher and the shop smelled warmer with the morning light, he realized that life often had a way of handing a man more than he asked for. Tom finally folded the note carefully and tucked it into his coat pocket. He felt the paper's weight press lightly against his chest, a reminder that even small towns held stories that were larger than any single man could ignore. He picked up the boxes of bullets and placed them on the counter. "That'll be $10, Mr. Miller said, not noticing the small tremor in Tom's hand. Tom handed over the money, nodded politely, and took the boxes. Outside, the horse shifted in the morning warmth, ears twitching at the distant clatter of a wagon. Tom lifted the boxes into the saddlebag, the note still pressed against his chest, and mounted slowly. As he rode down the main street, he realized something important. The quiet town of Redridge, so ordinary on the surface, held secrets in every shadow, in every closed door, and sometimes a cowboy came for something simple and left carrying something far heavier. The streets were emptying now. A butcher swept the front of his shop. Children ran past, laughing, their mothers' calls echoing in the air. Tom's eyes softened as he passed them, the weight of responsibility settling over him. Yet he rode on with a calm determination. There would be time to decide what to do, time to understand the life behind the words he had found. But for now, he simply rode, the sun at his back, the town quieting in the early morning, and a secret resting in the pocket of his coat. Even a simple trip for bullets, he thought, could change a man's day, a man's life. And as he guided his horse toward the next street, toward whatever the morning might hold, Tom knew one thing for certain. He could never unsee what he had just found, and that truth, like a hidden trail in the forest, would follow him wherever he went. The morning air felt warmer now as Tom rode slowly toward the outskirts of Redridge. The sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows of the buildings onto the dusty streets. Though he had intended to spend only a few minutes in town, the weight of the folded note in his coat pocket made his mind heavy. He had never been one to meddle in other people's lives. Cowboys, after all, were supposed to be lone riders, moving with the wind and worrying only about their own paths. But something about this note, about the hurried, trembling handwriting, stirred a curiosity and a concern he could not ignore. Tom guided his horse along the edge of the main street, passing the general store and the small church that always smelled faintly of old wood and candle wax. He could feel the tension in his chest growing, the way a storm builds before it rains. Clara, the widow whose name had been written on that note, had somehow left a piece of herself in Miller's shop, and now, by chance, or perhaps by fate, Tom held it in his hands. He had read the note only once, but its meaning lingered in his mind like smoke that refuses to vanish. The note had hinted at things he did not yet fully understand. Clara's husband had been involved in business dealings that had gone wrong, dealings that might have left enemies in town or even further afield. There were hints of betrayal, of danger, and of money that had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. Tom did not need to know all the details to sense the seriousness. He had been around people long enough to know that secrets like this did not stay buried. They festered, waiting for the wrong person to stumble upon them, and then they exploded. As he rode, Tom thought of the town itself. Redridge appeared quiet and ordinary, but, like many small towns, it carried stories behind closed doors. Everyone had their private struggles, their private fears. Perhaps that was why Clara had chosen to hide the note in a gun shop, somewhere public yet unnoticed. Perhaps she had believed that no one would ever find it, or that only someone who needed to would stumble across it. Tom did not know, but he felt a sudden responsibility. He reached the edge of town, where the dirt road widened and the grass grew taller, brushing against the horse's legs. The houses were fewer here, scattered across the open land, with fences leaning at odd angles and barns showing the wear of many seasons. In the distance he saw a small cabin tucked among a cluster of trees. It was simple, modest, but it had the kind of warmth that spoke of care despite hard times. He slowed his horse as he approached, unsure if this was where Clara lived, but something told him it was. Tom dismounted, tying his horse to a nearby post. He held the note in his hand, turning it over slowly, reading the words again, letting their meaning sink in. He had not intended to get involved. He had only wanted bullets. Yet here he was, standing outside a widow's home, feeling the weight of a secret that could change lives. His fingers tightened around the paper. He could not simply leave it in the shop or throw it away. That would be wrong. He knocked on the door lightly, then waited. For a moment there was no sound except the whisper of the wind through the trees. Then the door creaked open and Clara appeared. She was a woman of quiet strength, her face showing traces of sorrow but also determination. Her eyes, wary and cautious, met Tom's. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft but careful. I found this," he said, holding out the folded paper, "in Miller's shop this morning. I thought you should have it." Clara's eyes widened, and for a moment she did not speak. Then she stepped closer, taking the note from him with trembling hands. She unfolded it carefully, reading it quickly, her eyes scanning the words that she had written in private, words she had never meant for anyone else to see. When she finished, she looked up at Tom, a mix of fear and relief in her gaze. You found it," she whispered. "I thought no one would ever know." "I didn't mean to invade your privacy," Tom said gently, "but it was here. I couldn't just leave it. It didn't feel right." Clara nodded, folding the note and placing it carefully in her pocket. "I didn't know who to trust. After my husband, after everything that happened, I couldn't risk anyone finding out. Some people in town would have used this against me if they knew. I didn't want trouble, but I also didn't know how to protect myself." Tom listened, understanding more than he expected. He had seen fear before, seen the way it could make people careful and distant. He had seen secrets eat away at lives slowly and quietly until they could not be hidden any longer. He knew then that the bullets in his saddlebag were no longer the important thing. What he carried now was something heavier, something that required judgment, patience, and courage. Clara invited him in, and he stepped inside the cabin. It was small but tidy, with a fireplace in the corner and a few simple furnishings. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting patterns on the wooden floor. Clara motioned for him to sit, and Tom placed his hat on the table. "I suppose you want to know what all this means," Clara said, her voice low, almost afraid that the walls themselves might be listening. "My husband, he was involved with people he shouldn't have been. He made some choices that put him in danger. I didn't know how to handle it when he died. I had no one to turn to, no one to trust. I wrote the note because I didn't want to forget, but I also didn't want anyone else to find out." Tom nodded slowly. "Secrets like this don't stay hidden forever," he said. "Sometimes the right person finds them. Sometimes it's not luck, it's timing. And right now, I think you've found the right person to help you." Clara looked at him unsure. She had lived in caution for so long that trusting someone felt almost impossible. But something in Tom's calm, steady gaze made her pause. He was not here to judge, not here to exploit. He was here to listen, to understand, and perhaps to help. Over the next hour, they talked quietly, carefully, about what had happened. Clara explained the details she could share, avoiding names that might put anyone at risk, but giving Tom enough to understand the gravity of the situation. Her husband's dealings had left enemies, and though she had managed to survive so far, she knew it would not be easy to continue alone. The note had been her attempt to keep control, to make sense of a life suddenly upended. Tom realized that the note was more than just a piece of paper. It was a map of fear, of survival, and of hidden truth. He thought about the bullets he had come to buy and realized they were insignificant compared to what he now held in his hands, the trust of a person who had no one else. He promised her he would help, that he would keep the secret safe, and that they would find a way to navigate the dangers without exposing her to unnecessary risk. Clara's relief was visible, though tempered with worry. She had spent so long alone, solving problems in silence, that the idea of sharing the burden felt strange and new. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying with it the faint sounds of the town. Voices, a hammer striking metal, the distant bark of a dog. The world continued to move, indifferent to the quiet cabin at its edge. But inside, a small change had occurred. Two people, brought together by chance and a hidden note, now shared a secret that had the power to alter both their lives. Tom stepped outside to check on his horse, feeling the weight of responsibility more keenly than ever. He had intended to buy bullets, to go on with his routine life, and yet fate had led him to something more complicated, more human, and more important. As he returned to the cabin, he knew that the coming days would be challenging, that secrets like these never stayed buried easily, and that trust was fragile and precious. But for the first time that morning, Tom felt a sense of purpose beyond the ordinary tasks of a cowboy's life. The simple trip for bullets had turned into a journey of responsibility, courage, and compassion. And as Clara and he spoke quietly in the small cabin, both understood that while the road ahead would not be easy, neither would face it alone. The note, once hidden behind a box of bullets in a small shop, had found its way into the right hands, and Tom, the quiet cowboy who had come into town for something ordinary, now carried something far heavier, something real, human, and consequential. The sun was high in the sky now, casting a golden light over the town of Redridge. Yet, for Tom Sawyer, the brightness outside did little to ease the shadow that had settled over his thoughts. He had come to town with one simple goal: to buy bullets. But the note he had found in Miller's shop, the secret it contained, and the trust Clara had placed in him had shifted his day, and perhaps his life, in ways he could not ignore. He rode back to the outskirts of town slowly, his horse stepping carefully over the possibilities. He thought about Clara, a woman who had lived through fear and loss, and about the danger hinted at in her note. He imagined the lives of those who might have wanted her harmed, and the small ways in which secrets, once discovered, could erupt into chaos. A man who lived in Redridge might think the town was quiet and safe, but Tom knew better. He had seen greed, envy, and anger hidden behind polite faces, and he knew that even a small secret, if carried into the wrong hands, could have consequences far beyond anyone's imagination. Tom stopped his horse on a small rise overlooking the fields beyond town. He rested his chin on the saddle horn, letting the wind brush against his face. He tried to sort through the conflicting feelings in his chest. On one hand, he had no obligation to anyone. He was a cowboy, used to traveling alone, making his own way. The note behind, leave Clara to her own devices and ride out of Redridge as if nothing had happened. That would be the simple choice, the safe choice. But there was something inside him that would not allow it. He thought back to his own past, to times when a secret had destroyed someone's life because the wrong person had learned of it too late. He remembered the sorrow in a friend's eyes, the regret that lingered long after the danger had passed. He had promised himself then, as he promised himself now, that if he could prevent such pain in another person's life, he would. Tom dismounted and began walking alongside his horse, the grass brushing his boots and the wind carrying the distant sounds of the town. He considered what actions were available to him. One option was to confront the problem directly, to speak to those who might have threatened Clara, to demand answers, or to bring the truth to light. That path, though, was dangerous. People who had been involved in shady dealings did not take kindly to interference, and he could be walking into a trap. Another option was to stay close to Clara, to protect her quietly, offering help only when necessary and allowing her to take the lead. This path required patience, caution, and constant awareness, but it minimized immediate danger. But it would not resolve the underlying threat. The thought of doing nothing, of walking away entirely, made his stomach twist. He could not abandon someone in danger, not when he had been given a chance to help. As he pondered, Tom's mind wandered back to the note, to the careful words Clara had written, to the fear she had carried alone. The handwriting had been shaky in places, betraying her anxiety and the weight of what she had kept hidden. She had trusted him simply by letting him hold the note, even without fully knowing him. That trust, fleeting as it might have been, was now his responsibility. The paper in his pocket felt heavier than any box of bullets he had ever carried. He walked further into the fields, letting the quiet of the morning wrap around him, but the silence brought no clarity. In fact, it made the dilemma sharper. Each option he considered carried risk. Each choice had consequences. His thoughts drifted to the town itself. How the people of Redridge would react if secrets were revealed. How lives could be changed or destroyed by a single misstep. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavier than any saddlebag or rifle he had ever carried. After a long walk, Tom finally stopped near a small stream that cut through the fields, its water sparkling in the sunlight. He sat on a rock and watched the water flow, trying to calm the swirl of thoughts in his mind. He thought about Clara again, imagining her alone in that small cabin, facing danger she did not fully understand. She was strong, yes, but she was also vulnerable, and that vulnerability, paired with the secret she carried, was enough to make any man pause. He considered what it meant to act. Action required courage, yes, but also strategy. He could not rush into confrontation blindly. He would need to observe, to understand the situation fully, and to plan carefully. He thought about gathering information, speaking to those who might help without revealing too much, and watching for signs of trouble before making a move. Every step had to be measured, every choice deliberate. The stakes were higher than any duel or chase he had faced before. As he sat by the stream, he realized that the moral dilemma was not simply about choosing to act or not act. It was about understanding the consequences of action and inaction alike. To do nothing could allow harm to come to Clara. To act recklessly could put both of them in danger. To act wisely required patience, judgment, and courage, the kind that came not from guns or strength, but from a careful heart and a clear mind. Hours passed as Tom sat there, thinking, planning, and imagining the possible outcomes. He thought about the people who might be involved, the friends and enemies of Clara's late husband, and the potential dangers that lurked in the shadows of Redridge. He thought about the importance of timing, of speaking only when necessary, and of keeping the trust he had been given intact. The note had started it all, but now it was up to him to decide what to do with the information. Finally, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with hues of orange and gold, Tom rose and brushed the dust from his boots. He had made a decision, though it was not a final solution, only the first step. He would stay close, observe, and prepare. He would protect Clara, help her navigate the dangers, and ensure that the secret she carried did not destroy her life. He would act with caution, with patience, and with determination. Riding back toward the town, Tom felt the weight of responsibility settle fully on his shoulders, heavier than the saddle, heavier than any gun or box of bullets he had carried. But he did not feel fear. He felt purpose. He felt the quiet, steady certainty of a man who had chosen to do what was right, even when it was difficult. As Redridge came into view, its wooden buildings bathed in the warm light of late afternoon, Tom adjusted his saddlebag and glanced at the folded note in his coat pocket. It was small, seemingly insignificant, yet it held the power to change lives. He would carry that power carefully, wisely, and with respect for the trust that had been placed in him. By the time he reached the edge of town, Tom had resolved himself to the truth. Life did not always hand a man simple tasks. Sometimes it handed responsibility, and sometimes that responsibility came hidden in the most unexpected forms. A note tucked behind a box of bullets, a widow's fear, a secret waiting to be revealed. And Tom, the quiet cowboy, had chosen to carry it, knowing that the journey ahead would be long, challenging, and uncertain. As he walked his horse down the main street, past familiar faces who smiled politely or nodded in greeting, Tom understood something important. Courage was not measured by the number of bullets a man carried, nor by the enemies he faced, nor even by the fights he won. Courage was measured by the quiet decisions a man made, by the choices to do what was right when the easy path was to look away. And in that moment, Tom felt a quiet strength settle within him, as steady and enduring as the town itself, ready to face whatever came next, ready to protect a secret that was no longer just someone else's burden. It was his as well. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the small town of Redridge, painting the streets in shades of gold and amber. Tom Sawyer guided his horse slowly toward the outskirts where Clara lived, the note still folded safely in his coat pocket. Each step of the horse's hooves against the dirt road echoed in the quiet town, a reminder that time was moving forward, that decisions could not be postponed forever. He had spent the day thinking, planning, and weighing his options, and now he knew it was time to act. Tom arrived at Clara's cabin just as the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, sending soft streaks of pink and orange across the sky. He dismounted carefully, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him. The cabin was quiet, smoke rising lazily from the small chimney. Clara was outside tending a small garden, her hands working the soil with care and concentration. She looked up as he approached, her face tense but curious. "I thought I might check on you," Tom said softly, keeping his voice low. "We need to talk about the note and what comes next." Clara's lips pressed together, a mixture of fear and relief crossing her face. She had spent the entire day alone, thinking about the secret she had carried for months, now exposed to the world in a way she had never intended. I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "I spent so long protecting myself by staying quiet. The thought of anyone acting on this, even to help, is frightening." Tom nodded, understanding completely. "I know. And I won't do anything without you. But I also know that staying quiet isn't safe. Or there are people who might use this secret against you, and we need a plan before they do." Clara looked down at her hands, her fingers digging into the soil. "I didn't mean for anyone else to know. I thought I could handle it alone." "You don't have to anymore," Tom said firmly. "You're not alone. We'll figure this out together." Inside, the cabin was modest but welcoming. A small fireplace in the corner gave off warmth, and the faint smell of herbs and bread lingered in the air. Tom and Clara sat at the small wooden table, the note between them. Clara unfolded it again, her hands trembling slightly, and read it once more to make sure nothing had been misunderstood. I just want this to end without anyone getting hurt," Clara said softly. "I don't want trouble, but I fear it will come whether I act or not." Tom leaned forward, his voice calm and steady. That's why we have to be careful. We can't act recklessly, but we also can't ignore it. There are ways to protect you, to make sure the danger is minimized. But it will require trust, patience, and courage from both of us." Clara looked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. She had spent so long hiding, so long fearing, that the idea of relying on someone else felt strange. But there was something in Tom's steady gaze that reassured her. He wasn't here to exploit the secret or make her life more difficult. He was here to help, to protect, and to act with caution. Tom outlined a plan. First, they would gather information. They needed to understand exactly who might be involved, who could pose a threat, and how serious that threat might be. Second, they would make discreet contact with anyone who could offer support, someone trustworthy who would act without causing unnecessary attention. Third, they would ensure Clara's safety while navigating the dangers, keeping her home secure and avoiding unnecessary exposure. Clara listened, nodding slowly. It feels overwhelming. I've never had to plan like this before, but I trust you. That's all I ask. Trust me, and we'll handle this together, step by step. The days that followed were tense but careful. Tom and Clara moved quietly through the town, keeping to the shadows when necessary, observing the streets and the people who might pose danger. Tom spoke to a few reliable townsfolk, carefully gauging their loyalty and their awareness of Clara's situation. Every conversation was measured, every word weighed for its impact. Meanwhile, Clara learned to share the burden she had carried alone for so long. It was not easy. She had grown accustomed to fear, to secrecy, and to managing her life in isolation. But Tom's calm presence offered her a sense of security she had not felt in months. Slowly, she began to relax, to plan, and to think beyond mere survival. One evening, as the sun sank low, casting long shadows across the town, Tom noticed a stranger lingering near the general store. His movements were subtle, careful, yet there was an unmistakable sense of watchfulness in the way he observed the streets. Tom's instincts told him immediately that this man was connected to the danger Clara feared. He moved quietly, staying at a distance but making mental notes of the man's behavior. Returning to Clara's cabin, Tom shared his observations. "There's someone who doesn't belong," he said. "We need to be cautious. We don't know their intentions, but it's enough to stay alert and keep your home safe tonight." Clara's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and determination crossing her face. "I've managed so far, I can't let anyone hurt me now. We'll handle this, together." That night, they reinforced the cabin, securing doors and windows, and prepared for the possibility of confrontation. They moved quietly, speaking in low tones, each aware of the stakes. The air was tense, but there was also a sense of solidarity. For the first time in months, Clara felt that she had someone to rely on, someone who understood the danger without being reckless or careless. Over the next few days, Tom and Clara worked to understand the full scope of the secret. They traced her husband's dealings, careful not to expose themselves, and identified those who had been involved and those who might still pose a threat. Every discovery brought both relief and anxiety. Some dangers were less severe than feared, but others required vigilance and careful planning. Clara grew stronger with each step. She learned to trust her instincts again, to act with caution, and to rely on Tom's guidance without surrendering her independence. The bond between them deepened, not as a fleeting attachment, but as a partnership forged in necessity and trust. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, they finally reached a point of clarity. They had identified the main source of danger and had planned a way to confront it without unnecessary risk. Tom looked at Clara, her face calm yet determined, and knew that they were ready. "It won't be easy," he said, "but we can handle this. We know what to do, and we know how to protect you. I trust you, Tom. Let's end this before it becomes worse." The following morning, they moved carefully through the town. Tom stayed alert, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. Clara walked beside him, steady and composed, ready to face the consequences of the secret she had carried for so long. Their approach was calm but deliberate, measured to avoid panic, confrontation, or unnecessary exposure. When they reached the person at the center of the danger, Tom spoke first, his voice calm and firm. "We know what's happening. We're here to make sure no one gets hurt. But this ends now. The secrets you've threatened to use will not harm anyone if we can help it." The confrontation was tense, but Tom's steady presence combined with Clara's courage allowed the situation to be controlled. Words were exchanged carefully, threats neutralized by reason and strategy, and slowly, the danger began to dissolve. By the time they returned to Clara's cabin, the weight of fear had lifted slightly, replaced by relief and the quiet satisfaction of a problem handled wisely. Clara looked at Tom, gratitude and respect shining in her eyes. "I never thought it would end this way," she said. "I was so afraid, but you helped me face it without fear controlling me." Tom nodded, a small smile on his face. You were brave too, Clara. Courage isn't just about facing danger alone. It's about working through it, step by step, and not letting fear control your life. As the sun set fully, painting the sky in deep reds and purples, they stood together on the porch, looking out over the quiet town. The secret, once a source of fear and danger, had been handled with care, discretion, and courage, and for the first time in months, Clara felt a sense of safety and possibility she had thought lost forever. Tom adjusted the saddlebag on his horse, the boxes of bullets long forgotten. What mattered now was not ammunition, but the strength to protect, the wisdom to act carefully, and the courage to face the unknown together. And as the night fell over Redridge, the quiet cowboy and the widow he had come to protect shared a moment of understanding. Sometimes the heaviest burdens were carried not with weapons or strength, but with patience, courage, and trust. The morning sun rose slowly over Redridge, washing the town in soft light and casting long shadows across the wooden sidewalks and dusty streets. The events of the past few days had left the town quiet, as if holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Tom Sawyer rode calmly toward Clara's cabin, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him. Today, the secret that had haunted Clara for months would finally face the light, and it would be his role to ensure that it did not harm anyone unnecessarily. Clara was already outside tending the small garden she had worked so hard to maintain. Her movements were steady, her expression calm but alert. She had faced danger before, but today felt different. Today, the unknown that had lurked behind closed doors and hidden notes would be brought out into the open. Tom dismounted and tied his horse to the post, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of trouble. The town seemed peaceful, but they both knew that appearances could be deceiving. "We're ready," Tom said quietly, approaching Clara. "It's time to see this through, to face the truth and make sure it's done right. I've spent so long hiding, I never thought the truth would be revealed without pain. But with you, it feels possible." They entered the cabin, the note between them as a reminder of what had brought them here. Clara took a deep breath and began to speak, recounting the events surrounding her late husband's dealings, carefully explaining what had happened and the mistakes that had been made. She did not hide the truth, but she also avoided unnecessary details that could endanger anyone. Tom listened intently, his calm presence providing Clara with the courage to continue. As she spoke, the tension in the cabin began to shift. The fear that had gripped her for so long started to loosen, replaced by determination and clarity. For the first time in months, Clara felt that she could confront her past without being controlled by it. Once she had finished, Tom took the note from his coat and unfolded it one last time. "This," he said softly, "is the key to understanding the full picture. It's not just about danger. It's about ensuring that the truth is handled carefully. People deserve to know what's real, but no one deserves unnecessary harm." With Tom's guidance, Clara decided it was time to face the remaining threats directly. They had identified those who had been involved in her husband's dealings and were prepared to confront them in a calm, controlled manner. The goal was not revenge or punishment, but clarity and resolution. They needed to ensure that the secrets could no longer be used as weapons against her or anyone else. Their first visit was to a man who had been involved in minor dealings with Clara's husband. Tom approached him first, his voice calm but firm. "We know about the past, and we know there has been fear. But we're not here to fight or accuse. We want clarity, and we want peace." The man hesitated, then slowly nodded, understanding that confrontation did not mean conflict. Over the next few hours, Tom and Clara met with others connected to the secret, each encounter handled with patience, careful words, and steady guidance. By the end of the day, most of the misunderstandings and fears had been addressed. Those who had once been threats now understood that the truth could exist without causing harm, and Clara's position in the town was finally secure. By late afternoon, the weight that had pressed on Clara's shoulders for so long had begun to lift. She looked out the cabin window, watching the sun dip behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. She felt a sense of relief and accomplishment, knowing that the secret she had carried alone was now managed, understood, and no longer a source of fear. Tom stood beside her, silent but supportive. He had been with her through every step, from the discovery of the note to the careful handling of the threats. Though he had come to Redridge for something as simple as bullets, he had left carrying responsibility, trust, and a sense of purpose far greater than he had expected. "It's done," Tom said quietly. "The truth has been revealed, and you're safe. The danger is behind you, at least for now." Clara turned to him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and newfound strength. "I couldn't have done this alone," she admitted. "You've given me more than protection, you've given me hope. I just helped you find a way to use it." As night fell over Red Ridge, the town seemed to breathe again, the quiet streets reflecting the peace that had been restored. Clara's cabin glowed softly with lamplight, a symbol of safety and resilience. Inside, Clara and Tom sat together, sharing a quiet meal and reflecting on the events that had brought them to this moment. The tension that had filled the past days was gone, replaced by calm, understanding, and a quiet satisfaction. In the weeks that followed, life in Red Ridge returned to its familiar rhythm, but for Clara and Tom, nothing would ever be quite the same. Clara had regained control over her life and learned the value of trust, while Tom had discovered that sometimes courage was measured not by the bullets a man carried, but by the responsibility he chose to bear. The note, once hidden behind a box of bullets in Miller's shop, had set a chain of events in motion that changed lives. What began as a simple errand for a cowboy became a journey of courage, trust, and revelation. Secrets had been revealed, fears had been confronted, and the quiet strength of two people working together had ensured that danger was faced wisely, not recklessly. Tom eventually prepared to leave Red Ridge, knowing that his role in Clara's story had come to a natural close. He packed his saddlebag, checked his horse, and turned to Clara one last time. "You're ready now?" he said. "You've faced everything and come through stronger. Keep the courage you've found and you'll handle whatever comes next." Clara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reflected her relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Tom, for everything. I'll never forget what you've done." With a final nod, Tom mounted his horse and rode slowly out of Red Ridge, the warm light of the evening casting long shadows behind him. He had entered the town for bullets, but he left carrying something far heavier, the knowledge that courage, trust, and quiet determination could change lives in ways no weapon ever could. As he rode into the horizon, the town behind him bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Tom felt a sense of peace. Clara's secret was safe, the danger had been handled, and life, for the first time in months, could move forward without fear. He knew that the memory of these days would stay with him, the quiet courage of a widow, the careful handling of secrets, and the understanding that the weight a man chooses to carry can be the most meaningful measure of all. The story of Red Ridge, of Clara, and of the cowboy who had come for bullets ended not with conflict or violence, but with trust, courage, and the quiet revelation of truth. And in the calm that followed, both the town and those involved found the relief that comes from knowing that fear has been faced, secrets have been revealed responsibly, and life continues with hope and strength for the future.